Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to talk about the biggest question facing every NBA team heading into this unofficial second half of the season. The All-Star break has come and gone. There's around 30-ish games left for teams to play. We're in the home stretch. It's time for teams right now to go ahead and either make or break their seasons. And with that comes a lot of questions. So I thought I'd go ahead and preview this portion of the year by giving you the biggest one that I have for every single squad. We're going to go in alphabetical order, starting off with the Atlanta Hawks and finishing with the Washington Wizards. And these questions can range from, could a player or a team turn around their season and make a deep run into the playoffs? What's a team's playoff viability look like? Things like that. And of course, for teams that aren't really in the playoff race, just kind of how is their season going to go the rest of the way? Can young players develop? Things like that. There's going to be timestamps for every team if you want to go ahead and find your favorite squad. But for the moment, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. And as always, comment down below your answer to the question I give to your team. Or if you've got a different question, go ahead and let me know down there too. Let's get into the questions. First up, we've got the Atlanta Hawks, and the question for them is this Trae Young's last ride with Atlanta? I made a full video talking about the Trae Young trade rumors at the All-Star break. He talked about things a little bit and basically said, right now I'm focused on Atlanta. But from all the rumors we're hearing, and we've heard talk like that before, I wouldn't be surprised if this is the final 20-ish game stretch that Trae Young plays with the franchise. I'm not certain about that, but it's the first time I've ever felt like there's a real chance that he gets traded in the offseason. And if he does, it'll be the end of a really crazy up and down career with the Atlanta Hawks. Maybe they make a crazy run here at the end, they push their way to the play-in, and have a fun first-round playoff series that maybe convinces him to stay or convinces the team that they can still build a winner around Trae Young. They don't have to go into a straight rebuild. But if the season goes terribly down the stretch, say they don't even make the play-in or an exit before the playoffs, I think a Trae Young trade is very possible. For the Boston Celtics, my question is, can they remain healthy? I don't have a lot of concerns about this team. I made a full video recently where I talked about how this team is playing at a historic level. They have been one of the better teams in NBA history so far this season, and if they stay healthy, I think there's a very small chance that they lose in the Eastern Conference, and I think they'll end up winning the NBA Finals. But it's just a matter of maintaining your spot, not dealing with those big injuries. Can Kristaps Porzingis be healthy for a full playoff run? What about Al Horford? Because he's dealt with some injuries in the past. If they keep everybody on the court, this team is going to be ridiculously hard to stop, but I could see injuries popping up heading into the stretch run of what has been a really long season for them. Next up, we've got Brooklyn, and their question is, can Kevin Ollie be the long-term solution at head coach? Very recently, they fired Jacques Vaughn. They've been dealing with a lot of turnover with head coaches over the past few years, and with the firing of Vaughn, they did promote Kevin Ollie, who hasn't had a head coaching job in the NBA quite up to this point. He was in a couple of coaching conversations, I know, with Detroit over this summer, with OKC a few years ago when we eventually hired Mark Daignault. So he's been given some looks, but finally, he's got a shot as a head coach here for the Brooklyn Nets, and we'll see what he does. They've been dealing with a lot of turnover as of late. There was Kenny Atkinson, then Steve Nash, then Jacques Vaughn. Is he finally the fit for this team, or heading into the offseason, maybe they have another bad half to the season after struggling through the first half of the year, and Kevin Ollie's not the fit, and they again have to try and figure this out in the summer. For the Charlotte Hornets, my question is Trae Mann a building block for their future? As a Thunder fan, I've been a big fan of Trae Mann for a while, and I'm really glad he's gotten more opportunity in Charlotte. And in the first few games he's played there, Trae has been fantastic with a lot more minutes. Over the second half of the season, what I really want to see from Charlotte is just development from the young guys. Brandon Miller, Mark Williams, who's been dealing with a lot of injuries this season, LaMelo Ball, if he can stay healthy. But Trae Mann, to me, is one of the most interesting pieces. He was the big get coming over from the Gordon Hayward trade, and if he can develop into a real player for them, that could be a big deadline acquisition that means great things for their future. I still think Trae Mann has a lot of potential. He's shown it already. We'll see what he can do in a sustained run in the second half of this season. For the Chicago Bulls, my question is, can Coby White go out there and win Most Improved Player? I don't see this Bulls team having much success the rest of the year. I think they're going to be a play-in team, losing the play-in, and head into a pretty pivotal offseason. But along the way, Coby White has been fantastic. He's been one of the lone bright spots for this team. And hey, if he can go out there and win Most Improved Player, even though this was kind of a disaster of a season from a team success standpoint, it shows how great Coby White has been this year. It's a big-time accolade for him, and he continues to establish himself as a core piece of this team's future and maybe a future star in this league. So hopefully Coby White can go out there and contend for that award, and if he wins it, at least that's a small bright spot for what otherwise has been kind of a disastrous season for Chicago. For the Cleveland Cavaliers, my question is, are they equipped for an Eastern Conference Finals run? After dealing with a bunch of injuries to begin the season, the Cavs are finally getting healthy, and they have looked like one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference consistently over the last month and a half. They're playing amazing basketball, very rarely ever losing. In fact, they're 9-1 in their last 10 games. They've got a crazy streak under their belt recently. The Cavs look fantastic. This is how I thought the Cavaliers would look this season. If you remember, I was really high on them coming into the year, and they're putting things together at a great time. I do still wonder if they're ready to make the Eastern Conference Finals. Last year, they got embarrassed in the first round. Did they do enough to fix those issues? Are they ready to go ahead and make a deeper run? Especially when the Eastern Conference has a lot of great teams. Of course, there's Boston there. You've got Milwaukee. You've got the Knicks, who have looked amazing for a majority of the season when they're healthy, with big-time additions now in town. There's a lot of tough competition in the East, but this Cavaliers team, if they can push their way to the Eastern Conference Finals, I think it would go a long way to proving the long-term viability of this squad and potentially convincing Donovan Mitchell to stay in Cleveland long-term. For the Mavericks, my question is this finally Luka Doncic's MVP season? For a while now, we've all been saying it's just a matter of time until Luka wins an MVP, probably even multiple of them. It's never been a matter of, is he putting up enough statistically? It's been a matter of team success. And this season, it seems like the Mavericks may be poised to go on a crazy run in the second half that might end up vaulting Luka Doncic into the MVP favorite spot. They're on a 6-game win streak at the moment, a few games before the deadline and a few games after, and with PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford in town, the Mavericks look like an unstoppable force at times. Luka's playing the best basketball of his career, Kyrie Irving's gotten healthy. This is a great team, and a lot of people are thinking that this is a squad that's going to propel themselves up the standings in the second half, and if they do, if they get to a 5 or a 4 seed, Luka Doncic is going to make a great case for winning his first MVP award, and I think there's a real chance that he ends up winning it. For the Denver Nuggets, my question is the bench good enough for the repeat? This Nuggets team, of course, are the reigning champions. They've looked great all season, but I do have some concerns about their bench. Now, the starting lineup is near flawless. Jamal Murray, KCP, MPJ, Aaron Gordon, and Nikola Jokic. One of the best starting fives in the league, led, of course, by the best player in the world in the Joker, who ended up having a historic run last season in the NBA playoffs and eventually in the NBA Finals, winning his first ever Finals MVP. He's the front runner for MVP at the moment. I have no questions about their starting lineup, but when it comes to the bench, I do have my concerns. This isn't a team that went out there and made an upgrade at the trade deadline. They mostly stood pat, and we're going to see if that works. They're relying on a lot of youth, a guy like Reggie Jackson. DeAndre Jordan may have to play minutes here and there, which is a bit concerning. I don't know. If there's one flaw with this team, it's definitely that bench. And in a Western Conference that's a lot better than it was last year, that might be their one and only potential downfall. For the Detroit Pistons, my question is, are we about to see the Jaden Ivey breakout? Inexplicably, towards the beginning of the season, Monty Williams had Jaden Ivey coming off the bench, not playing a lot of minutes, oftentimes being the 11th guy to enter games. It was crazy. It didn't make a lot of sense. The Pistons were losing relentlessly, and finally now they've won a few more games. They put Jaden Ivey back in the starting lineup, and specifically as of late, he's been playing fantastic over his last 10 games, which does include just a 2-point performance against Phoenix. He put up 19.2 points per game, 3.8 boards, and 3.5 assists. He's scoring more and more efficiently. He's being aggressive. He's starting to look more and more like the part of a franchise cornerstone, and that's great. Really, all the Pistons need in the second half of the season is to see who is a cornerstone for this team going forward and who isn't. They've got to make some hard decisions, I'm sure, in the offseason. And hey, if Jaden Ivey can establish himself as a potential star next season over the second half of the year, that's a big win for them in what otherwise has been a disastrous season. For the Golden State Warriors, my question is this momentum for real? After a horrible season up to this point, the Warriors have seemingly figured it out. They're playing way better than they have in the past. They're looking like the Warriors that we saw like last season, where they felt like a team that could potentially make another run towards the Western Conference Finals late in the season. They're putting it together. Steph has been amazing. Klay Thompson went and played off the bench for a game, and he was great in that game, so it seems like that's going to continue to be a trend. Podziemski's playing great. Kuminga's really breaking out, looking like an MIP guy. Andrew Wiggins is figuring it out a little bit. Draymond Green's back and he's hooping. The Warriors are putting things together. Chris Paul is supposed to come back from injury at some point here soon. And hey, maybe the Warriors, after being really down all season, are able to regain some of the magic we've seen from them for years at this point, make it into the playoffs through the play-in, and be a terrifying team to face off in the first round, maybe even making a very surprising playoff run after how most of the season has gone. There is also a chance that this is fool's gold and that the Warriors don't have enough juice to make it into the playoffs, or even when they get there, they just face a team that's way better than them. But for the moment, they are feeling like the Warriors of old. For the Houston Rockets, my question is, do you consider moving Jalen Green to the bench? Fred VanVleet has been missing some time with injury as of late, and in those moments, Amen Thompson has stepped up and been fantastic as a starter, showcasing exactly why he was their 4th overall pick this year, and why so many people, me included, are really high on him as one of the eventual best players out of this draft class. And with Jalen Green continuing to struggle as he has all season, it's not been the year that a lot of people, me included, were hoping for him in Houston. When Fred VanVleet comes back, do they consider putting Amen Thompson and Fred VanVleet in that starting backcourt and moving Jalen Green to the bench? It might seem a bit drastic, and I don't know if they'll actually do it, but if they want to give themselves the best chance of trying to make a last-second run to make the play-in tournament, it may end up being the right decision. For the Indiana Pacers, my question is, can they convince Pascal Siakam to stay? It seems pretty likely that he will continue to play in Indiana beyond this half season, but over the second half of the year, it really is their best chance to convince him that, hey, Indiana is the place for you. If they have a lot of success in the second half of the season, say, maybe run up the standings like a 5 or a 4 seed, which isn't that out of the question. If they make it into the playoffs, say they win a first-round series or just have a great competitive first-round matchup, I think that goes a long way to saying to Siakam that this is the spot you should be in and will pretty much erase any doubt of him ever walking. For the Clippers, the question is this finally the year where they stay healthy? LA has had a number of chances seemingly to go on deep playoff runs back in 2021 when they faced the Phoenix Suns in the Western Conference Finals, but Kawhi Leonard ended up tearing his ACL. Last year, going into the playoffs, it felt like they were good to go, but right before, Paul George ends up hurting himself, doesn't return for the playoffs, and then Kawhi Leonard gets hurt in the first round. Is this finally the year where they're able to stay healthy for a full run? Because it feels like this is the best Clippers team that we've maybe ever seen. It's definitely the best team of the Paul George, Kawhi Leonard era, and this may be one of their final chances to finally go ahead and get that ring. They feel like one of the best teams in the West, but as usual, it's probably going to come down to if this team can actually stay healthy, which hasn't been something they've done up to this point. For the Lakers, the question is, do they have another big second half run in them? Last year, we saw the Lakers build a lot of momentum post-trade deadline, push their way into the play-in, made it into the playoffs, and eventually pulled off a couple of upsets, making their way to the eventual Western Conference Finals before falling to the Denver Nuggets. This year, they're again in a similar situation where they're hovering right around the play-in, going into the home stretch of the season. Can they pull off some similar magic? Can LeBron and AD alongside D'Angelo Russell, who's playing the best basketball of his career, alongside Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt, the rest of the guys in the squad, do they have another run in them? Can they again recapture some of that magic, make the playoffs, and potentially pull off some upsets on the way? For the Memphis Grizzlies, my question is, can G.G. Jackson keep this up? With all the injuries that have plagued the Grizzlies all season, it's given the chance for some young guys to go ahead and show out. Vince Williams is a great example of this, and another one more recently is G.G. Jackson. He's the youngest player in the entire NBA, a guy that a lot of people thought should have went back to college instead of entering the draft. The Grizzlies took a chance on him later in the draft than he probably would have gone otherwise, and he's been balling as of late. They've given him a lot of opportunities. He's knocking down three-point shots, taking guys off the dribble, giving them some of their highest scoring performances of this recent season. He's been amazing, and it seems like he may be a player that's way more NBA ready than I think anybody realized, and if he can play like this next season, he's going to be critical to a Grizzlies team that's again trying to get back to their championship contending ways. Over the second half of the season, I'm looking to see if G.G. Jackson can sustain this, and if he can, the Grizzlies may not have only found a diamond in the rough, they might have found a bona fide rotation player for a playoff team next season. For the Miami Heat, my question is a play-in spot going to be enough for them this season? Of course, last year we saw them make a historic run going from a team that lost their first play-in game to winning their first round matchup against the one-seeded Bucks and eventually making it to the NBA Finals, shocking the entire NBA world en route. It was extremely impressive, and going into this year, it seems like the Heat may end up again as a play-in team, and again, they pulled off some amazing magic last year, but I don't know if that same thing is going to work. This is a ridiculously tough Eastern Conference with the Celtics up there at the top, great teams in the Cavaliers, the Knicks, the Bucks. You, of course, have the Sixers if they get Embiid back at some point. The Indiana Pacers have looked great at times. This is a stacked Eastern Conference. So for the Heat, while typically it hasn't really mattered much for them in terms of seeding, is this a year where they can again pull it off from the plan, or do they need to take the rest of this regular season really seriously and try and make it as far up the standings as they can? For the Milwaukee Bucks, my question is, can Damian Lillard turn things around? It has not been one of his better regular season campaigns. He's been way more inefficient than usual, hasn't been as aggressive. They've struggled to integrate him into the offense. Just hasn't looked like the usual Damian Lillard that we're accustomed to. However, at the All-Star break, he was amazing. He, of course, won the three-point contest. He won All-Star Game MVP. He looked more like the Dame of old, so maybe this was the reset he needed. And going into the second half of the season, we could see more of the typical Dame. And if that happens, the Milwaukee Bucks have a way better chance of getting back up the standings and making themselves a force in the playoffs. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, the question is, are they built for the playoffs? We've seen them play amazing so far this regular season. They're on pace for 58 wins. Ant's been great. Cat was an all-star. Rudy Gobert is going to win the DPOY. Great supporting pieces. This is a team that feels poised to potentially make a deep run in the Western Conference for the first time since 2004. The question is, how far can they actually go? It's a really tough Western Conference. They don't have a ton of experience, and they do have some concerning aspects. The offense is not great. It doesn't feel like it's super playoff ready at some points. They average a lot of turnovers. It's kind of concerning. Now, the defense is amazing. I think that's certainly going to hold up, but can they put enough points on the board? Can they hold on to the ball enough to beat some of the better teams in the Western Conference? I just dropped a full video on the Wolves, and I do believe that they are playoff ready, but it's a question that a lot of people are asking going into the second half of the season. For the New Orleans Pelicans, my question is, do they have somebody that could elevate themselves to the next level? This Pelicans team has been kind of a balanced attack throughout the season. You've had Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum, and Zion Williamson all averaging right around 20 points per game, and great supporting pieces around them. That's been the recipe for success. Nobody is really shining that much beyond the others. However, when you get to the playoffs, you need somebody to be that all-star, all-NBA guy. Is it going to be Zion? Is he going to get really aggressive and showcase the Zion of old? Is it going to be Brandon Ingram, who was amazing in his lone playoff series against the Phoenix Suns a few years ago? Is CJ McCollum going to showcase some of his veteran experience in playoff runs? It's got to be somebody. I don't think they can just have three guys averaging right around 20 points per game and take down some of the better teams in the Western Conference. At the moment, they're slated to play the Denver Nuggets, and to beat a team like that, somebody's got to step up and be that guy for them. For the New York Knicks, the question is, what do they look like when they're fully healthy? This team, before dealing with some injuries, was rolling. OG Anunoby was a great addition. Jalen Brunson was balling. Julius Randle was playing amazing hoops. They were a lockdown defense, even without Mitchell Robinson in the lineup. But since that great stretch they were on, Julius Randle got hurt. Jalen Brunson missed some games. Mitchell Robinson still has not returned from injury. And now they've made more additions in Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks to a team that was already looking really good. When healthy, this feels like it's going to be one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference and has the real potential to make a run to the Eastern Conference Finals. We still have to actually see it in action. We haven't seen a majority of their pieces play together, but when they all get rolling, if they build together some chemistry, if they have time to, I think this team's going to be really formidable. It's just a matter of, do they actually get healthy enough to give themselves some time to play together before the playoffs roll around? For the Oklahoma City Thunder, the question is, how much will their inexperience matter? This is a team that's way ahead of schedule. They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to be one of the top 4 seeds most likely, and they feel like they've got a real chance to make a deep run in the playoffs for the first time since 2016 for the Thunder. They have not made it out of the first round since Kevin Durant left, and if there's a team that's going to do it, it's going to be this squad. But the question is, are they ready to make a run to the Western Conference Finals? Are they ready to make it to the finals? Or is their inexperience going to hurt them? When people talk about this team, that's one of the biggest flaws, because unlike a lot of the other really veteran-laden squads heading into the West playoffs, a lot of guys in this Thunder team have never experienced those moments. To me, as a Thunder fan, it does feel like a team that's built for those moments, and I don't think it's going to matter that much. But say they play like the reigning champion Denver Nuggets, even though they might have some favorable matchups, is the inexperience going to matter, and how much will it end up dragging them down in their first ever playoff run? For the Orlando Magic, my question is, can they make it into the playoffs? At the moment, they're a play-in team, and I think they will end up making it to the playoffs. And if they do, that's a big success of a season for the Magic, who are continuing to break out of their rebuild. They're on the cusp, it feels like, of becoming one of the better teams in the East. It's just going to take some more time for Paolo to develop. Franz Wagner probably going to make some changes in the offseason to give them more shooting, and if they do, this team's going to be really scary for years. But for this season, I just want to see them make the playoffs, give one of the top seeds a somewhat interesting series in the first round, and if they do that, it's a wildly successful season for the Magic. For the Philadelphia 76ers, the one and only question on everyone's mind is Joel Embiid coming back. He dealt with a major injury in that game against the Golden State Warriors, has not played in a while, very well out of MVP conversations at this point, but they just really need him back. When he was playing, he was the best player in the world. Before he got hurt, he was firmly my MVP. He had been the best player in the season, was having one of the best seasons individually of all time, regardless of position. He's a force, and it felt like we were in for potentially the run where Joel Embiid silences a lot of the doubters. Tyrese Maxey's become an all-star. Nick Nurse has been great as a head coach. The Sixers feel like they can make some noise, but if Joel Embiid doesn't come back, none of this matters. Hopefully he is able to return, but if he isn't, I wouldn't be super surprised. For the Phoenix Suns, my question is, are they legitimate championship contenders? Coming into the season, it felt like the answer to that was yes. They had Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, some solid supporting pieces, even though the depth was kind of shaky, but they had the star power that felt like it could carry them over the top and end up helping them win the Western Conference and maybe even the NBA Finals. They had one of the best odds to do so coming into the year, but because of a lot of injuries and a lot more issues with the depth than I think they were expecting, the Suns have been, I guess you could say, disappointing. I mean, they haven't been bad. They're a top, I think, 6 seed at this moment, but they wanted to be a top 4 squad. They want to win the championship, and they're going to need to make a big run the second half of the season to try and secure home court advantage. And when they get to the playoffs, they've got to dial it up a little bit. They did make some additions at the deadline in Royce O'Neal, David Roddy, and Thaddeus Young in the buyout market to try and bolster this rotation a bit. But we've seen a lot of issues in the fourth quarter. They've been one of the worst fourth quarter teams in the entire league. Injuries continue to plague them. The defense has been really a struggle so far this season. So while they've certainly got the top end talent to compete for a championship, there are holes that makes it a little bit questionable. For the Portland Trailblazers, the question is, can Scoot Henderson end the season strong? He had a really rough beginning to his rookie campaign, but recently he's been turning up a lot, and in the second half of the season, it seems like he's poised to start for the rest of the year, and if he does, I hope he can go ahead and just go on a tear at the end of the season. I want to see him go out there and ball out, even though the Blazers aren't really playing for wins, they're rebuilding. Really, I think all they want to see in the second half of the season is Scoot Henderson playing out of his mind, making big-time strides, and showcasing exactly why he was a top 3 pick and why many people, me included, view him as the future of the franchise. For the Sacramento Kings, the question is, can they go ahead and avoid the play-in tournament? This is a team that last year was the 3 seed in the Western Conference, did end up losing the first round to the Golden State Warriors, but they were a really good team all season, and they are, again, really good. It's just that the Western Conference is way better, and this has resulted in them being the 8 seed at the moment. They definitely want to go ahead and avoid the play-in tournament. If they can get up to like a 6 or a 5 seed, that would be huge, especially because some of the play-in teams are going to be really tough at the moment. They'd have to play the Dallas Mavericks in the first play-in game, and the winner of the Lakers or the Warriors in the second one. If the Kings want to go ahead and give themselves the best chance at making some kind of run in the playoffs and upsetting someone, they need to avoid the play-in tournament at all costs. For the San Antonio Spurs, my question is, how long do you continue to play Victor Wembanyama? A lot of the season, the Spurs have rested Vic on the second half of back-to-backs, played him limited minutes, but more recently, they have somewhat fully unleashed him, and he has been putting up ridiculous numbers. I think he's pretty close to securing Rookie of the Year as long as he doesn't miss significant time in the second half of the season. However, it might be the smart thing after a few games here to go ahead and just shut him down. You're not playing for anything at this point. He's shown how ridiculous he can be. He's made big-time strides. You don't want to see him get hurt in a meaningless game, say, at the beginning of April. So if they shut him down for the final, 10 games or so, I wouldn't be surprised, and honestly, that may be the right move to make for his future long term. For the Toronto Raptors, the question is, who's here for the long haul? The Raptors began their rebuild this season by trading away OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam, and now they're kind of in limbo. They've been really bad since making those deals, which makes sense to trade away 2 of their best players, but they do still have Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quigley's there, RJ Barrett's been playing pretty well as a Raptor. Those guys all kind of feel like locks to stay here long term. But who else? Is Jakob Poeltl one of your long-term solutions at the big man spot, or do you trade him going into the offseason? What about Bruce Brown? They were seemingly going to trade him at the deadline, but they held on to him instead. You've got a bunch of other young guys who have some potential. Who's going to be part of this core long-term, and who will probably be dealt in the deadline? I think a lot of that is going to be decided in the second half of the season, seeing how guys play down the home stretch. For the Utah Jazz, the question is, can they still find a way to go ahead and play spoiler? The Jazz at one point were a play-in team. At the moment, they've moved down to the 11 seed behind the Warriors and the Lakers, but they're not that far behind. They're just 2.5 games back of the Warriors, just 4 games back of the Lakers, with a decent bit of season to go. Colin Sexton's been playing great. Lauri Markkanen's been fantastic as usual. Some of their young guys are finding their strides now. They did trade away some pieces at the deadline that ultimately probably will drag them back and prevent them from being a play-in team, but in the second half of the season, if they can find a way to become one of those play-in squads knocking somebody down who really wants to make it, I think that would be a little bit of a success for a Jazz team that's still going through their rebuild. And finally, for the Washington Wizards, the question is, can Deni Avdija keep this up? I'm sure a lot of you haven't noticed because probably not a lot of you are watching Wizards games, but Deni Avdija has been on a tear recently. 24 points against the Celtics on 7 of 10 shooting, 21 points against the Sixers, 25 against the Dallas Mavericks, 43 most recently against the New Orleans Pelicans, so with 15 boards and 3 dimes. He's been a monster, shooting over 50% from the field and over 40% from deep at this point. He's found his stride over there in Washington, and it's a year where he's due for a contract in the offseason, so contract year Deni is going insane. If he can keep this up, he'll not only earn himself a bag in the offseason, but he's very quickly going to establish himself as one of the biggest cornerstones for a Wizards team that's still trying to figure out who exactly should be here for the long haul. With all that being said, those are my questions for all 30 NBA teams going into the, again, unofficial second half of the season. I'm really excited to see how these teams play down the stretch. It's going to be an amazing finish to the regular season. Let me know down below in the comments again, like I said earlier, what your answer is to the question that I asked your team. And if you have a different one, also let me know too. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. I appreciate you watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.